Everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to be cooking kind of an herb pork chop with some French onion, fried potatoes, and bacon. We're going to bake our 2 sourdough loaves we prepped, as well as some cheesy broccoli. So let's get our sourdoughs in the oven. I had my 2 Dutch ovens preheating for the last hour at 500 degrees. So they're nice and hot and toasty. And we're going to flip these 2 loaves out. We have our basic sourdough, and then we made a parmesan and oregano one. Okay, let's flip these guys out. There we go. So this is our parmesan and oregano. Flip him out on here. And then we're going to give our round loaf just kind of a basic score. Maybe I'll do an X in the middle, get a little fancy. I wonder if you could overscore your sour bread. There we go. So we've got some fancy scoring on this one. I'm going to put this one in my round loaf. Remember, our Dutch ovens are very, very hot since we had them preheating for 500 degrees. So make sure you use your oven mitt if you're doing it at home. I'm going to place them in here. And we did have these chilling in the fridge since 6 a.m. this morning. So not quite, overnight, but still a good amount in there. And then let's prep our regular one. So this was the dough we made last night at dinner time. And we're going to give a nice long score down the middle. And do some little scores down here. Perfect. And then we're going to pop these in the oven at 500 degrees with the lid on. And we'll bake them for 20 minutes. Then we'll take the lid off, bring our temperature down to 450, and bake for another 20 minutes or so. There we go. Let's put our lid back on. And then we're going to bring these and place them in our oven. Okay. So again, my oven is preheating at 500 degrees. We had our Dutch ovens heat in there at 500 as well. And I'm going to shut that to keep the heat in. The reason we put our lids on is it helps keep the moisture and keep it nice and hot in our Dutch oven, but without exposing it to quite direct heat so it won't get brown too quickly. Okay, now I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes so I don't forget to take off the lid. And then we're going to start prepping the rest of dinner. Okay, we have our pork chops, which we are going to season up. So we're cooking for 7 tonight. So we've got 8 pork chops. And we're going to season these up. I'm going to first pass over them with a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. I use a lot of Worcestershire sauce when I'm using meat because the acidity in it helps make it nice and tender. And pork chops or pork in general, if cooked wrong, gets really dry really quick. So these just help keep them nice and tender. So we're going to do the first level over with that. Then we're going to sprinkle with a little bit of garlic salt. So just a little over the top of each one. Perfect. And then we're going to use a little bit of Montreal steak seasoning. This has just a little bit of a kick into it. And just a little over each side because we're going to be seasoning both sides up. And the way I cook my pork chops is I like to sear them off in my pan and finish them in the oven. That way they stay nice and moist. And we're going to use a little bit of garlic and herb blend. So just over the top of each one. And then We are going to flip these each over, and then we'll cover again with all of our seasonings to make sure we have them coated on both sides. That way the flavor goes all the way through. And these are bone-in pork chops, so they have both the tenderloin and the rib meat part for them. I tend to like the bone-in pork chops over the deboned ones because the rib meat, I think, is a nicer cut of meat on them. There we go. So they're kind of like the T-bones of the pork chops. And so we've got our Worcestershire, and then we're going to do our garlic salt. Again, a light sprinkling. Just be careful not to go too heavy on it. And garlic salt, if you aren't familiar with using it, it's not quite as salty as straight up salt because it's essentially garlic juice that has been dehydrated like with salt. So it gives you a nice flavor from that, but it's not quite as salty as straight up salt. And then our little bit of our Montreal steak seasoning. There we go. Just cover over it. And then we're going to finish with some garlic or onion and herb, Mrs. Dash. And Mrs. Dash's, if you're also not familiar with it, it is essentially a salt-free spice blend. So you could make it all from the herbs in your cabinet, but I just grab it from the store. Okay. Now I'm going to bring these over here to marinate for just a second. That way they can really pick up on the nice flavors. The Worcestershire can start breaking down the fat in the pork chops to keep it nice and tender. Okay, while we are doing this, let's prep our potatoes. We're going to be using a couple. Hi, Bruni. She's letting me know. I know I see you. She is very possessive of the kitchen. Whenever I'm in the kitchen, she doesn't want any other dog to. So let me pull it out. It's about, if you want to come out for me, about 4-5 strips of bacon. So I would say 1/3 of a pound. These are really sticking on. There we go. We'll put our leftover over here. So we used about 1/3 of our package, and I'm just going to give them a quick kind of chop through on my cutting board here. And then we're going to start sauteing them up in our frying pan here. I'm going to be using my scan pan to cook up this bacon for the potato pan. It's kind of like a hammered cast iron pan. So it's really thin, but it has a cast iron coating on it, which is great for doing like a seasoned potato. So we're going to put our chopped up bacon in here. Here, we'll spread this around. And then I'm going to give my hands a quick wash. We're done with this guy. And then we'll turn that on. Okay. So we're going to turn on our skillet at about a 6. And I'm going to take my tongs and we're going to just spread out our bacon so it can start to render down the fat and cook and get crispy. Because I do not have a whole package of bacon here, I'll add a little bit of olive oil towards the, once it starts to render down, just to give it a little more so it can crisp up. Right now, we're going to prep our onion. I'm not going to use all of my onion, so I'm just going to cut it in half, and we'll save the other half for another recipe for another day. So this is a yellow onion. Yellow onions are like the best. Yellow onions, Valdalia onions, are the best for sauteing or in soups and rice because they have a higher sugar content. So they caramelize up really nice and bring out that nice flavor. So we'll be using half of a yellow onion for our potatoes. I'm going to just peel off this last shell of it. There we go. And then we're going to do kind of a small dice. Let me get some of these onion hairs away. And I'm going to just slice through about 5 times. And then I'll go back and we're just going to do kind of not a super small dice, but just a good dice. We'll chop through. These will go great with our potatoes because we're going to be using a little bit of Lipton's French onion soup mix to kind of season up our potatoes to give them a really nice onion flavor that just works really well with them. And now we're going to prep our potatoes. These are going to be using some yellow potatoes, which are a little bit waxier than like a russet potato, but were really great for frying up as well. And we are going to kind of cube these into kind of a smaller, if you think about like almost homemade hash brown, like the cubes, we're going to cut them up about that size so that they cook up nicely in our frying pan. Let's get our heat going. And since these are yellow potatoes, I'm leaving the skin on them because they're nice and tender. The skin is different from a russet potato. It's a bit more tender and will cook up a little bit nicer. So we'll go through here, give these a chop, keep my potatoes separate. And then we'll also, it's kind of funny, we're using a lot of onions in these potatoes because we've got our sweet yellow onions, and then we'll also add some green onions at the very end, and then our French onion mix, but they're just going to be absolutely delicious. So we'll get these chopped up and prepped, and then we will move on to our next thing. We'll also be making cheesy roasted broccoli with some cheddar cheese, and then I have a sweet hammy melon that we're going to slice up as our fruit. So I'll be excited for that. A hammy melon, if you don't know what it is, it looks kind of like an oblong cantaloupe, but it has a crisper texture than a cantaloupe, similar to an Asian pear, and much sweeter. They had them at Costco this week, so my family loves melon, so of course we're going to grab it and try it and enjoy it. I'm always big about having my kids try new foods, different types of foods, so that they're open to things as they grow older. I grew up eating a wide variety of food, and so I'm not a picky eater, and I'm hoping my kids won't. I do have my middle daughter, Evie. She is so picky. She is my biggest food critic. I feel like nothing I make can please her. She's always like, oh, that's what we're having. That again. And I'm like, oh, this is great food. She already came in and she was like, what's for dinner tonight? And I'm like, pork chops, potatoes. And she's like, ugh. And I'm like, you like pork chops. But you know, you can't please them all. There we go. So I've got our yellow potatoes chopped up. Let me get this one a little smaller. You want to make sure you keep them all about the same size so that they cook up at the same times. Otherwise, you'll have crunchy potatoes that won't be as nice with your soft, tender ones. Okay, I'm going to take my spatula here and I'm going to break up my bacon and spread it around. But as you can see, if you look in our pan, there's hardly any grease coming out of the bacon because we're using a significantly less amount of bacon. So in order for you to get that nice crisp on it, you have to add a little bit more fat. So I'm going to add a little bit more oil so that it will crisp up instead of just burning. That's kind of what happens when your pan is bigger than the amount of bacon you have, that it can't sit up and make a nice little thing. So we're going to add about, I want to say maybe 2 tablespoons of olive oil, which we'll then also be using to fry the potatoes in, but that olive oil will get a nice bacon flavor to it. But it's one of those things where you don't want to put a whole pound of bacon in here because that's just, as much as I love bacon, that might be a bit too much bacon for the potatoes. So there we go. So now I'm going to just spread it out so that it is nice, so it can start crisping up all over. Okay, we've got our potatoes here, our onions. We're going to start melting some butter in our small dish here. This is going to be for our broccoli that will pop in the oven and roast. So we're just going to melt a little bit of this butter up with some garlic. So it's going to be like a cheddar garlic roasted broccoli. I don't think we need quite that much. So probably about 3 tablespoons max. And let me turn my back burner on.
So Lori just sent you a heart.
Oh, well, thank you, Lori. And there we go. So we've got our back burner melting on here. And then we're going to put in some fresh or some minced garlic. If you had fresh garlic, then you'd probably use about a clove or 2. Reach in here. And I'm going to try to get a little bit of the garlic juice with this as well. I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to put it right on top of my butter. So my whole butter has to melt first before it starts to saute it. And that'll be nice. There we go. And let's prep our broccoli. So I'm just going to be using, this is a 12-ounce bag of broccoli. And turn my bacon down a little bit. And I'm going to put a sheet of parchment paper on here because we're going to have cheese on it. And if you don't line it with the parchment paper, the cheese will stick to the tray and then you'll be working forever to get it nice and clean later. So always spend the extra 10 cents on the parchment paper. It will make cleanup and easier. I'm big about anything I can do to make my cleanup easier is great because you know, I've got 5 kids and they make a lot of dishes. It's crazy how, like, the idea of reusing a glass for their water is crazy, you know. They just keep grabbing a new glass and a new glass. And I said, we don't need 7 glasses. You can use the same glass. I promise you, you won't die. Okay, we're going to spread our broccoli out. Look at this. We got a whole stalk in there. A couple of them. There we go. We're going to spread it out, and I want to try to put all of my florets facing up on here. That way they'll get the nice cheesy coat on them. There we go. We don't need that stalk. And let's look at our butter over here. Where did my little spoon go? I'm going to give this a nice little stir. Beautiful. Letting it melt up. We want to wait until our our garlic gets a little brown. Okay. Now you see our bacon is starting to crisp up nicely in here. Perfect. So we're going to add in our onions first, and we're going to let them caramelize just a little bit before we add in the potatoes, because once we add in the potatoes, the onions kind of essentially stop caramelizing because the potatoes kind of take the heat away from it. So we're going to cook our onions in first. Get all of these guys up, but not our green onions. Our green onions we're going to reserve till later because if you put them in right now, you kind of will lose all of their fresh, like mild onion zing that we want to keep on them for when we're going to dress them up later. So I'm just going to coat all of the onions with that mixture of the bacon grease and the olive oil. And we'll let those start. Perfect. And now you can see it is starting to bubble up perfectly. It's funny, I've had these little teeny tiny pots forever. They're like so cute. And for the longest time, I'm like, what am I going to use these for ever? They are perfect for like melting butters or heating up a small sauce. Or when I make my son like homemade, or not homemade, but like tortellini in the morning for school. I'll put it in a thermos. I literally cook his single serve in that one pot, and it takes like hardly any time to boil the water. So it's not as useless as I originally thought it was. I did not buy it. I got it as a gift. So I take that as a win. Okay, we're going to put a little bit of garlic salt in here so that when we pour it over our broccoli, it will give it a nice salty flavor. Not too much. That was probably like a half a teaspoon. Give it a nice stir. We can see our garlic is starting to get a nice brownish golden color to it. So we're going to now take this and I'm going to spoon this over our broccoli so that we get kind of a nice flavor on everything. Spooning, you could try to pour it over evenly, but a lot of times when you pour it, you end up like dropping a big glop on one piece and where you miss the broccoli altogether. So Sometimes it takes, take the extra minute to spoon it over. That way it gets evenly. You could also toss it all together in a big bowl. But again, I like to try to minimize the dishes as much as possible because nobody likes washing dishes. There we go. Like in the summer when my kids are home from school all day and I'm cooking them 3+ meals a day because they always need a snack, I have to run my dishwasher twice, or I have to go buy paper products because we go through so many dishes. But if you think about it, 5 kids plus 2 adults times 3 meals again, so that's instantly just 21 plates there. Okay, so we've got our broccoli covered in our garlic butter, and then I'm going to give it a nice coating of cheese. But let me give our onions a nice stir first. Perfect. Bacon and onions, can't beat that. There we go. Okay, now we're going to give and I'm just using shredded sharp cheddar. There we go. I'll just give a nice coating. Broccoli and cheddar cheese is so good. There we go. Try to make sure, pile it on. And these, when we turn our oven down to 450, I'm going to pop these right underneath my my Dutch ovens, and that will allow the broccoli to roast up and the cheese to melt. But you'll have kind of the Dutch ovens on top blocking like direct heat, so your cheese won't burn before your broccoli is roasted through. There we go. So I'm going to just put this to the side since we are done with that. And we've got about a minute left over there before we need to take the lid off. So let me stir this one last time, and then we're going to pop in our little bacon, pop in our potatoes. Okay. So again, these are just some yellow potatoes, and we did not peel them because yellow potatoes have a lovely tender skin. So they're just much nicer when you fry them up in compared to like a russet that has kind of a chewier, drier skin. So we've got all these. Now I'm going to give them a nice stir to make sure I coat them with all of that mixture of olive oil and the bacon grease, because that will give it a really lovely flavor. There's always one that escapes. There we go. Okay. Perfect. Now the trick is we've got them coated. We're going to spread them all out and kind of push them down, and we're going to let them cook and sear up on one side. And the trick is you don't want to touch them for a hot minute, and I won't add seasonings to them until I have them cooked most of the way, because if you add your seasonings too soon, you will burn your, they'll burn on the bottom of your pan. Okay. Looks like our Dutch ovens are ready to go out. Let me push. Okay, I'm going to get these trivets out for the lids, because now we're going to remove the lid from each of our Dutch ovens. And I'll pop them out so you guys can see. Let's get the lid off, and then I'll move it out here. So you can see how they've already had their nice burst and their rise. Beautiful. Now this next 20 minutes is going to cook it and give it that nice golden color to it. Take this one out, and then I'll show you. This is the traditional one, and you can see you've got that nice split in the pop. That is a result of doing your bulk, like I guess a bulk ferment or bulk rise in bulk proof. There we go. There's the word, in the fridge. So I kept them in there for 12 to 18 hours. Here, we'll put our broccoli. We're not going to put in yet. We're going to put that in about 5 to 10 minutes because it doesn't need as long as the bread. The bread will be done in like 15, 20 minutes. So we'll put those in a few minutes. Okay. let's get our pork chops searing up now that they have had a chance to marinate. And again, I'm gonna cook probably 4 at a time, and then we will put them back on the tray, cook the other 4, and then I'll pop this in the oven to finish cooking, because you don't want to try to cook your pork chop all the way through on your skillet, because that will leach out all of the good juices and make for a really dry meat. So we're gonna let this heat up. And while this is heating up, we're gonna just chop up our green onions for our potatoes in a little bit. So I always kind of cut off the very tips because I find they are chewy because they've kind of like lost a lot of their moisture. And then we're going to chop them down to about right where you stop seeing the green, because we want these to have more of a bright, mellow onion flavor. And the whiter part has a much stronger onion flavor, which won't be as nice since we're not going to be cooking them as long. So get that guy. So we're going to just leave the very tips of the bottom because that has a stronger onion flavor. I'm going to get a little bowl to put those in. Perfect. There we go. And we'll be able to throw these in our potatoes in the last few minutes. I'll flip my cutting board. And I'm going to give my knife a little wash because we're going to cut our melon up. And I don't want to have an onion taste on my melon. There we go. Perfect. Okay, I think our oil, let me see if I can do a drop test. Okay, we got that little sizzle starting to happen. That was when we know our oil is hot enough to start searing off our pork chops. If it doesn't sizzle right away, then you want to wait a little bit longer for your oil to heat up. Okay. And let's see this one. And we're going to sear these off on each side for about 1 to 2 minutes. Flip. We're not cooking them all the way through. We're just getting the sear. We'll finish off in the oven. Okay. We're going to move on to our melon in just a second, but I'm going to do my first kind of flip on our potatoes. And I'm just kind of pushing through and picking them up and flipping them over.
What seasoning do you put on them? I think for the pork chops.
For the pork chops, I used Worcestershire sauce, garlic salt, Montreal steak salt seasoning, and Mrs. Dash's onion and herb seasoning. And then we just kind of let them sit for a while, kind of marinate in that and cook them up. So it will be the Montreal steak has a nice peppery flavor to it. The garlic or the onion and herbs gives a nice savory. So it's a nice kind of like herby but not overpowering mix for it. Okay, we've got our onions, and we'll season up these onions or these potatoes with some French onion mix and some garlic salt. But we are going to do that towards the end because we don't want it to burn on the potatoes or the pan. Okay, so here is our sweet hammy melon. I'm going to get a spoon to scrape out the seeds. So this, if you've never had a hammy melon before, it's very similar to a cantaloupe, but it is sweeter than a cantaloupe, and it has a slightly different texture. It has a kind of a crunchier, crisper texture like an Asian pear, if you've ever had an Asian pear before. So we're going to take out the seeds. This is going to be our fruit with dinner. I always try to have fresh fruit every night with our meals, all of them. Make sure my kids get it in their diet. There we go. Nice scrape all those seeds out. Perfect. I'm going to flip our pork chops because I think they're about ready. There we go. And we'll do that. And remember, we're just getting our sear on both sides, not cooking it all the way through. We'll do that. We'll finish them off in the oven. So I'm just going to slice down. There's the long way. And you could always, I guess, serve it up like this if you wanted to. But let me cut off that part. But I just am going to slice through like this. And then I'm going to guide my knife underneath and cut it all the way along. And it smells so refreshing. It actually smells like, you know, when you get those like cucumber melon perfumes, it smells just like that. It's actually very pleasant smelling. It doesn't have a musk smell like a cantaloupe does. So we'll cut through here and we're going to cut off the whole bottom, just letting your knife guide through it. I always buy my fruit whole and fresh and never buy pre-cut at the store because they charge you an arm and a leg for pre-cut fruit there. Like cantaloupe, you can get a cantaloupe for like $3, but if you buy the medium size cut up, it's like almost $10. So I'd much rather just buy it and cut it up myself and save the difference. There we go. And it doesn't take long to cut your melon up at all. Same thing with pineapple. Pineapple is highway robbery, I feel like, at the store. And you don't even know whether you're going to get a good one. So many times you buy your pineapple and it's not sweet. It's hard and firm because they cut it up too soon. Okay, let's check on our pork chops here. Beautiful. Nice golden sear. Don't worry about us putting it back on this tray because we're going to be popping them all back on this skillet and putting them in the oven to finish up their cooking. So this is just to kind of sear it all the way through.
You gotta ask for the seasoning again on the pork chop.
Yes, so that is Worcestershire sauce, garlic salt, Montreal steak seasoning, and Mrs. Dash's onion and herb seasoning. So super simple, but it gives you a nice kind of, I want to say like a steakhouse feel to it. There we go. We're doing our flip. Perfect. And then we're going to spread these out, make them flat again. And the trick with frying up potatoes is you don't want to flip them too often. You want to allow them to really crisp up and get that nice brown shell on the outside. It also allows them to cook through and a little bit faster. Okay. Chop through this. And in just a second, we're going to pop our broccoli in the oven so that it can start to roast and cook up while our our pork chops finish searing off. There we go. So let's finish up chopping our sweet hammy melon. There we go. And let's go put our broccoli in the oven and we can check on the status of our bread. Our bread still needs about 10 minutes, but we can kind of look at it and give it a nice thing. Okay, beautiful. I'm going to put this right down here. And I realized I forgot to turn my temperature down, so I'm going to turn that down real quick. And to 450. Now, I know some people cook it at 500 for their second part, or they bring it down to 400. I like 450 because it gives you a nice golden crust, but not a super dark. Now, if you are the one who loves a really dark crust on your sourdough, then cook it at a higher temperature, and you could even do it for a little bit longer. I personally like more of a mild golden crust because I really like to use the sourdough for grilled cheeses. And if that crust gets too hard, doesn't make as nice of a grilled cheese. So we're gonna sear up these on the other side, and then we're gonna add all of our pork chops in, and we'll then finish them off in the oven underneath our bread. Let's finish slicing up our sweet hammy melon. There we go. I'm going to just do a kind of a quick through of these. I find if you dedicate a time of your day to like cutting up your fruit, because so many people say, oh, I buy it, but then I forget to prep it and then it goes to waste. I always do, I'm like, okay, we're going to have this one for dinner tonight, so I'll make sure I have time to prep it. Or sometimes when I get home from the store, I just spend like 30 minutes prepping all of my fruit for the week. That way it doesn't go to waste and the kids will eat it. There we go. My oven is just letting me know that it's up to the right temperature. We don't want the onion on there. Perfect. And, we feed a small army almost every single day. We've got between, 7 and 9 mouths every single day with, our 5 kids and then my parents. So we go through a lot of fresh fruit. Like we'll eat most of this melon tonight. There might be a little bit left over. Same thing. We'll eat about a pineapple per meal, 2 pounds of strawberries per meal. So we eat a lot of fresh fruit, and, just spending a little extra few minutes chopping it up really can save you a lot of money at the grocery store. I've got my mountain here. Normally a cantaloupe fits in here, but this was much longer than a regular cantaloupe. So we're going to have a tower of melons. They're just going everywhere. There we go. We'll save this last one. We can have it straight up. Okay. Let's give these a quick flip. You can see they're all crisping up nicely. Beautiful. And then we're going to spread them out. And now we're going to take our beautiful, we've got a nice sear on each side. So I'm going to turn off my skillet, and then I'm going to move these 4 pork chops over to my pan. And we're going to take this whole skillet and we're going to pop it in the oven. It's kind of heavy since we've got like 8 pounds of meat on there. So I'm going to use my oven mitts so I can hold the base of it. And then I just pop it in there for just a few minutes, about 5 minutes, and it will finish cooking it to be a nice, medium rare. There we go. And that way they're all going to be done at just the right time. Let's finish off our potatoes now, and we'll be ready to eat in about 5 minutes. Okay, get this over here. Okay, so these are our yellow potatoes that we have cooked in some bacon grease, olive oil, and with some onions. Now we're going to add a bag of Lipton's French onion soup. So I don't buy this often, but during the Super Bowl we made French onion dip for our, like potato chips, and you always get 2 packages. And these are just a great way to do potatoes. You can also do them in the oven. So we're just going to sprinkle them all over with the French onion seasoning. And we're going to also give it a light dusting of garlic salt. And now we're going to mix these up. And you always want to do the seasoning at the very end because it can stick to the bottom of your skillet, regardless of whether you're using a non-stick skillet or not. It will just cake into the grease and it will crisp up. So I always do my seasonings at the very end so that I don't have it all burnt on the bottom of my skillet. They smell absolutely delicious. And now we're going to toss in our minced up or our sliced green onions. There we go. And This gives a nice refreshing onion taste to it. And you already have that like kind of savory French onion to it and a nice pop of color. Beautiful. The dog is licking my feet. Hello, Bruni. There we go. Okay, we're just going to let them sit there, and I have them searing up on low. Let's grab our sourdoughs out of the oven, and then the rest of our food should be ready in just a second. I'm going to grab my oven mitts. I will say invest in good oven mitts. I know these are ridiculous. They've got they're bear paws. My friend gave them to me, but they have the silicone padding, which I love. Okay, let's grab our first one out. This is our traditional sourdough bread. I'm going to put it right here, and then we're going to grab our specialty loaf. Beautiful. I'm going to bring them right over here, and then we can't cut into our sourdough loaves right away, but what I like to do is I like to transfer them out of the Dutch ovens right as possible, because the bottom of the Dutch oven is still really, really hot, and therefore it can cause your crust to get a little burnt on the bottom if we don't grab it out right away. So let me reach in here, because you want a nice, beautiful golden brown. But if you leave it there, it can get a bit burnt. So I always take them out, because Dutch ovens retain their heat for like a really long time. Okay, let me pull. These lids are still hot. I'm going to move these two hot Dutch ovens over here so I have room to put our other food, since we don't need these now. But always handle with care. I will say, a Dutch oven, even 30 minutes later, it can be really hot to touch, especially with how hot it is. So now we're going to grab our broccoli out.
We got a question. What's in the specialty loaf?
The specialty loaf is parmesan and oregano. So we use both dry oregano and fresh oregano in there. And then parmesan. We'll see how that. I always like to do our plain one, and then I always do a specialty one to just make it a little bit more bougie. So here is our garlic broccoli with cheese. And what's really nice is when you scoop up, you'll have that nice kind of crispy and gooey cheese on there. And now we can grab our pork chops, but here's our sourdough real quick. So this is our traditional loaf, our beautiful one. I'm going to show you the nice bottom crust. And then this is our specialty loaf. And you can see the oregano kind of on the bottom. You have a nice crust on it. So beautiful. This is what we prepped last night. I think our video is streamed if you want to make it as well. But super simple and easy. But now I think our pork chops are nice and ready. So I'm going to grab them. Beautiful. So we've got our pork chops, our fried potatoes, our fruit. So let's plate our dinner up. I won't cut into our bread, because if you've made sourdough before, you've got to let it sit for about 10 minutes. Otherwise, all of the good moisture inside escapes, and it can leave you with a gummy bread. Also can dry it out. Okay, let's get our serving of our...
How long did you cook the broccoli?
The broccoli was about 10 minutes max. I cooked them underneath the Dutch oven so they wouldn't get direct heat on at 450. So we've got our potatoes. Let me grab a tong to get out our pork chops. We get a lovely pork chop. I think I can use these tongs to pick up our broccoli. But do you see how the broccoli still has a lovely, vibrant green color? You want that. You don't want to overcook them too long. And then here's our broccoli. And then, of course, we'll serve it with our melon as our fruit. So we have our hammy melon as our side. And, of course, let's not forget the star of the show is always the sourdough bread. Well, guys, thank you for joining us for tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live cooking shows every single day, just kind of show you what our family eats every single day. Feel free to comment or send us a message if you have any recipes that you would like to see us make, or even if you have a cooking question, we'd love to try to help you answer those. Again, thank you so much for joining us here tonight.